You could be asking from a place of genuine curiosity, but it can land as judgmental. If you are wanting to help your team develop better questioning capabilities, describe the reason why you're asking certain types of questions. I often coach leaders to do is to pause and count to 10 after you ask a question, because we usually are used to barreling forward. Start with what or how. Start with those open questions and you'll invite more thinking. So there's some common mistakes I see leaders at all level making around how they are problem solving and how they are helping their teams problem solve. The first one is jumping to solutions. We are, as human beings, are habituated. I mean, it's in our DNA to want to jump to all the action we can take and all our ideas and all our suggestions for fixing it or the solution without first having really defined what's the problem we're trying to solve. So one way to counter this mistake is to slow down and really ask that question: what problem are we trying to solve, before just jumping into all the action and suggestions and ideas. Then another problem that I see too is not really defining a true problem. So just this feeling of a problem. So, this thing is happening, but we haven't really defined an actual problem. And a simple way in organization, from a process perspective, to define a problem is: what's the target? What should be happening? What's actually happening? And then the difference between that is the gap or the problem that we need to solve. So leaders can get better at solving problems when we slow down and say, what should be happening? And that's the responsibility of management or leadership to define what that is, whether or not it's a standard that needs to be approved or a standard that should be happening, or a big strategic initiative, a goal that we need to achieve. And then what's actually happening. So going to see, validating with actual facts and experiences, and then defining that gap. And then we can really do some problem solving. And then the third big mistake I see leaders make is feeling they have to be the expert with all the answers. So again, not only just jumping to solutions and ideas, but also feeling like they have the burden and responsibility of coming up with all the answers. When in fact, if they can have more clarity on what's the target that needs to be achieved, and then providing the support and conditions for their team members to do the problem solving by asking questions, ensuring that they're going through a good problem solving process, and allowing them to experiment, is going to actually unburden you as a leader and come forward with more problems that are solved because other people are developing the capability and confidence to do so. And so collectively as an organization, you're more effective at solving the real problems that need to be solved, and not just putting all these Band-Aid solutions on what we think the problem is. So I talk a lot about how we have to break the telling habit. And it's so important for us to not just be putting forward all our ideas, and instead showing up not as much in advocacy for ideas, but more in inquiry. So the way we can think about asking better questions is: are we asking a true open question, one that we do not have the answer for? So we're not trying to lead the witness to the idea that we have in our head, but asking an open question. And typically these open questions start with what or how. So don't disguise it as a question like, what about trying my great idea? That is actually inquiry in disguise, or I should say advocacy in disguise as inquiry. So we don't want to have a leading question, but an open question that doesn't assume an answer. What or how? And if you can anchor those two words in your vocabulary and how you're showing up, you're more likely to be inviting real, genuine thinking. Something to avoid too, and these are not very effective questions, are those closed-ended questions or multiple choice types of questions. So that could be answered as yes, no, or is it this or that or that? We kind of put a box around the possibilities. So again, start with those open questions and you'll invite more thinking. And then many people are familiar with the 5 whys. So to try and get to root cause, why did this happen? Okay, well, why did that happen? Okay, well, why did that happen? Really effective open question to be asking when a problem, a gap between target and actual, has been defined. But the challenge with why questions is they often can come across as judgmental when they're not being asked about a root cause analysis. Like, why did you think that? Why did the team do that? You could be asking it from a place of genuine curiosity, but it can land as judgmental. So consider reframing those types of questions as what or how, like what were the steps that led you to that conclusion? Or how is the team approaching that process? So putting it back on the process rather than on the people. One of the most helpful ways that you as a leader or a coach or frankly human being to help other people learn a skill is by modeling the way and describing what you're doing and the reason behind it. I call it labeling it. So if you are wanting to help your team develop better questioning capabilities, describe the reason why you're asking certain types of questions. Even preface it by saying, I want to ask some open-ended questions because I really want to hear how you're thinking about this problem. So you're almost like narrating the reasons why you're doing something, but it makes it explicit for other people. One thing I often coach leaders to do is to pause and count to 10 after you ask a question, because we usually are used to barreling forward, like, do you have any questions here or any ideas on that? Okay, and just moving onward. We have to pause. But we're so uncomfortable with that pause. When we can narrate and just label it why we're doing it, it makes it more comfortable for the other person, and it models the way and makes it explicit about why someone should do that. For example, I would say, I'm going to count to 10 after I ask a question because I want to give you time to think about if you have a thought or a question, for me as well. And it just gives that space and that permission. So the more we can model the way and label what we're doing and why, it helps other people learn the skills of leadership and coaching. And it can feel really uncomfortable, but this labeling, it can be so powerful, and it takes away that awkwardness. It also holds you personally accountable for being intentional about how you're showing up. So it sort of serves multiple purposes. And then it becomes part of sort of the habit of how you and your team members are interacting with each other too. Just makes it explicit and intentional.